Today's video is brought to you by StoryboardThat.com. Please visit TeacherCast.net/StoryboardThat for a limited time offer. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the TeacherCast podcast. This is episode number 112, being recorded on Thursday night, November 20th, 2014. My name is Jeff Bradbury. I'm your host, and for the last few weeks, we have been putting on a lot of programming for you, dealing around the subject of the Hour of Code. And many school districts out there are getting ready for the Hour of Code. Of course, it's going to be coming up in December. And to prepare for the Hour of Code, we at the Tech Educator podcast, which is, of course, live every single Sunday night at 7 o'clock, have been doing some pretty amazing episodes. I want to ask you guys to check out our website over at techeducatorpodcast.com, where you can find some pretty neat examples here. Episode number 75 is called Do You Want to Build a Mobile App?, where we had our friends from Chris Sharons on talking about not only school district apps, but how students can get together and code. We also did an episode on preparing for the Hour of Code, episode number 72. And then, of course, we had a great episode number 71, called Coding in the Classroom Part 1 with our good friend Wes Fryer, talking all about how you can get involved with coding and how you can start to learn how to code. I know there's a lot of teachers out there that want to do the Hour of Code, but aren't quite sure how to do things. If you are out there looking for an Hour of Code supplement, maybe, I want to also bring up our websites over at TeacherCast.net, where you can check out our TeacherCast University site. We have some great online courses. Our friends over at AppShed stopped by a few months ago, actually, and we put together an entire online course on how to create an app. If your school district is out there looking for app creation and how to do little coding projects with your kids, you can certainly check out our online course featuring AppShed. We've got some pretty neat videos over there, and we are going to actually be expanding on that and doing a good job. So there's a lot of great things happening over here at TeacherCast.net, and of course there's several ways that you can connect with us each and every week and take part and even suggest some shows. You can, of course, reach out to us on Twitter at TeacherCast. You can leave us a voicemail, which we love voicemails. A lot of these coding shows have come from your voicemails. So find us there at teachercast.net/voicemail. And if you don't want to do that, you just want to send us an email, you can, of course, email us at feedback@teachercast.net. Now, people also ask us, how are these shows archived? Where do you find them? And I got to tell you, we have over 500 videos up right now over on our YouTube channel, which can be found at teachercast.net/YouTube. And we have about 7 or 8, I don't remember the exact number, but we have 7 or 8 different podcasting channels, both audio and video, over on iTunes. So you can either go to iTunes and search for TeacherCast, or go directly there and select all of our shows by going to teachercast.net/iTunes. My guest today is an author, an educator, and an amazing podcaster I want to bring on to our show today, Miss Rae Pica. Rae, how are you today?
I'm well, Jeff. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm not often on this end of things, and I find this much more nerve-wracking than being the interviewer.
I have to say, I completely agree with you. As a podcaster, when I get asked to be interviewed by people, I am absolutely nervous too. So I'll
when
try.
you're doing the interviewing, you know where it's going, right?
Yes. I promise you and the listeners, I will try to make this as easy as possible.
Okay, thanks.
Let's start with the hard question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And who is Rae Pica?
Oh, my goodness. Do you want to start with birth or?
Well, my grandfather always said I was born at a very early age, so we can start right there.
I was born at a very early age. Okay.
You've been an educator since around 1980, right?
Oh My word, yes. You see all the white hair, you know that it's caused. Yes, and I came into it in a very weird way.
Hmm.
I didn't do anything normally. Uh, let's see, where to begin? I guess, I've always loved to dance, but we didn't have money for dance classes when I was a little girl, and so I didn't take my first dance class until I was 24, and it was with a wonderful woman named Lucille Page West. She was a vaudevillian, and she was 64 at the time, and could put her leg up the side of the door jamb and wiggle her toes over. I mean, she was just astonishing.
Wow.
So, it was just a wonderful experience, and I have a tendency to jump into things without knowing how much I don't yet know.
Hmm.
So when some people in the town I had been living in said, "Would you like to teach dance to some of our preschoolers?" I said, "Oh, sure, I'll try that." I mean, it was ridiculous. I had no idea what I was doing. But I started doing it, and they were my little guinea pigs. And I realized very quickly that they didn't need dance technique at that age as much as they needed your basic body and spatial awareness and opportunities for creative self-expression. So I started studying movement education, and it just sort of swallowed me whole. Before I knew it, I was hiring and training instructors to send them to the local daycare centers and preschools. Well, first I was going into the local daycare centers and preschools, and I was the movement lady.
Hmm.
And then I decided I needed to be in more than one place at the same time, essentially. So I started hiring and training instructors, and then that became very frustrating. Um, you had really no control over what they were doing there.
Hmm.
And they were representing me. So that was challenging. And I was married at the time to a wonderful musician composer. And, I had been buying other people's music, like Hap Palmer and some of the wonderful children's recording artists. And I decided maybe if I had original music, I could package my program and market it nationally, even internationally. And so that's how the first Moving and Learning series was born.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that, because I got to tell you, when I checked out some of these books here, and we'll talk about the series in a bit here, called
Hmm.
Moving and Learning, that really piqued my interest a little bit. As a musician, as a composer, and of course, as somebody who's got little babies at home right now who are starting to move and find their own bodies.
Hmm.
It's just a fascinating thing to learn about and study.
I guess that's why it swallowed me whole. Honestly, Jeff, at first I thought that I would make enough money with this movement education thing so that I could go back to dancing.
Hmm.
It's just astonishing how naive I was. But it started with the physical aspect of things, teaching dance to them. And then the more I learned, the more I realized it was very much a holistic thing. Eventually, I began to realize that movement impacted not just the physical, but also the social emotional domain and the cognitive domain. And I began to see how movement for young children should be used across the curriculum so that they use movement and physical activity to explore and understand concepts falling under the other content areas, art, language arts, math, music, science, and social studies. And it really is fascinating because it just uh, I realized how important it is. The frustrating thing is that I seemed to be the only one out there who understood at the time how important it was. I mean, there were other people who had been doing it, and movement education had had its heyday in Europe and in this country in the 60s, but it didn't really last. And when I would say the words movement and children in the same sentence, to early childhood educators, they would back away from me as though I were a dentist holding a drill. And they thought, oh, those kids, they move enough, they move enough. They didn't want to do anything to encourage more movement.
You,
So it's been frustrating, and thus the white hair.
it's interesting listening to what you're saying here, and I completely can understand what you're saying. I've been to many conducting workshops, and I've worked with a great movement coach named Jerry Schweibert, who teaches out at the University of Michigan. And he starts by saying, look, if we as adults want to go reach something, we put our hand out and we reach for it. But if a baby wants to find something, the whole body just naturally moves over. And his whole job at these conducting camps is to get us moving as if we were 2 years old, and
Yes.
to not worry about being self-conscious about things, just get up and move. And so that's one of the reasons why Jerry is an acting coach, but he's also on the conducting staff. Because as a conductor, your job is to get up there and mimic music and be childlike and interpret everything. I personally find those lessons have helped me in the classroom, because I don't have to get up there and feel stiff like I am reading a book to my kids. I can completely, I mean, you can see me now. I'm moving with my hands right now. I can completely act out the lesson and really engage the students better without being that self-conscious person. Talk to us a little bit about the series. How many books are there in the Moving and Learning series?
Well, I've written 18 books. It's a bit of a writing disease, but there are three in the Moving and Learning series. There's Toddlers Moving and Learning, Preschoolers Moving and Learning, preschoolers and kindergartners moving and learning, and early elementary children moving and learning. So, as I said, we started off self-publishing them, which was not a great experience at all. Nothing that I was prepared to do. And at the time, we didn't. It was cassette tapes. Richard's music was on cassette tapes. We didn't have high-speed duplicating equipment or anything like that. So Richard was copying one and two at a time.
Mhm.
It was ridiculous. And then eventually, I had written a book called Dance Training for Gymnastics, because I was also teaching dance to gymnasts, or trying to. And the publisher was Human Kinetics, and they're actually the world's largest publisher of sports science and physical education books. So the publisher said, "What else are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I self-publish these curriculum packages," and so they were interested in seeing them, and so they they ended up publishing them, which was wonderful. They could reach a lot more people than I could, and from there. Um, Delmar published them. That was an early childhood publisher. And then they decided to focus strictly on their textbooks. And so now it is with Red Leaf, and it's been revised, and the music, of course, is just all on CD now. There are no more cassette tapes. And so they've been around for a long time, since the early 80s, I think, but revised and improved, and they're like my children.
I've heard many authors use that term of, you write this book, you have it, you keep it, but then once you release it, it is like having your kid go to graduation or go off to into the world and something like that. And you
Yeah,
said 18
yeah.
books, huh? Do you
Yeah,
have a
well,
favorite?
I always thought I would be a writer.
Hmm.
My mother's uncle was a Pulitzer Prize winning author,
Oh,
and he won the Pulitzer Prize for the work he did. The Miami Herald, I believe. I don't really recall, but his series of articles helped release an innocent man from prison.
oh.
So that was pretty cool. And so the writing is in my blood. And when I was in fourth grade, I wrote a 20-page novel and made the whole family listen to it in Nana and Grandpa's living room. And
Nice.
and so I always thought I would be a writer. So it's interesting that I took this detour, but I've come full circle, and now I'm writing about the movement and all of that, and now I'm going beyond that, because I've gotten so involved in the education of the whole child. I mean, this really, it's become a passion. As I said, it started off just looking at the physical aspect, but one of my you see the quote on my website is, "Children don't exist from the neck up," and it's just so frustrating that people treat uh, educators and parents treat children as though this is the only thing that mattered. And so I've gotten very involved in the education of the whole child. And now I'm writing a book for Corwin Press, and it's based on an essay that I did for Huffington Post called "What If Everybody Understood Child Development?"
Hmm.
So yeah, there were a couple of years in there where I hadn't written anything, and I figured I was all out of words, but they're back.
Well,
They're back.
let me ask you. I mean, you've been doing this amazingly for several years now. What continues to inspire you about education?
Oh, that's such a good question, Jeff. I think it's just the need that I see, you know. Maybe it's because that need never goes away. You know, I keep waiting for the revolution in education when we had Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and it included the bodily kinesthetic and the musical. You know, I thought, this is it. You know, this is it. People are finally going to understand. And that didn't happen so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the wonderful brain research that shows the connection between mind and body and the role that the body plays in the learning process, and why children need to move in order to learn. I thought, this is it. You know, all this brain research, it's right there. I don't have to fight anymore. But no revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, even with the childhood obesity crisis, I mean, it's a very sad thing, but I thought, well, now they have to take physical activity seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much. You know, I feel sometimes as though I'm chasing my tail, um, but the need continues to exist. So I keep fighting. I've got I got the love of writing and dance from my mother's side of the family, and I got the stubborn pig-headedness from my father's side of the family. So it has helped me to carry on. Although I must say, I've had, you know, a couple of burnouts along the way, uh,
Is that
because
normal
it's
though? I mean,
challenging.
especially over the course of a 180-day career, there's days where teachers just feel like, hey, I burned out. And over the course of a 10-year or 20-year tenure, you do get those burnout days. What advice do you have for somebody who might be in that burnout or might be sitting here going, you know, it's the end of the first marking period, end of the second marking period. I got to do something to kick my own butt sometimes.
Yeah, I know. That's another really good question, and one that I always wish that I had a brilliant answer for. Um, my worst burnout lasted about 5 months, and it was like being dead woman walking. And I was teaching part-time at the University of New Hampshire at the time, and it was a 50-minute drive from my home to the university, and I would talk to myself the whole time, you know, just trying to find some motivation. But I know I was maybe at best 70% with those students. It was very, very challenging. And the each time that I burned out, sounds like it happens often. It happened 3 times. Um, I just kept moving. You know, I just kept plugging away. And then it was always something professional that snapped me out of it. It was always some wonderful professional experience, something gratifying and satisfying that made the light bulb go on and my heart open up again, and I would think, okay, you know, I want to continue to do this. So I guess that would be my advice, to just, you know, unless you have just reached the point where it's just not worth it anymore, then I would say, you know, just keep on trucking, as they used to say.
And that certainly is good advice of, you know, I guess a wise person once wrote, the sun will come out tomorrow. And
Yes.
just to bring the music back into this, but
Yep.
just keep going with it. And you know, there's a lot of new teachers I know that listen to the program here, and you know, the advice of just tomorrow's a new day. You're going to be a
Yeah.
little bit wiser. Your kids are going to be different. You know, I go with the philosophy, even if today was a bad day, when tomorrow when your kids come in, that's the best day of their life. Enjoy it with them. And you know, I think what was it? I saw a tweet today or yesterday from Will Richardson that says, you know, school should be the best 6 hours of every kid's day.
Ah.
And you know, they come here whether they like it or not. They're come here to see you. Enjoy
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. How long have you been teaching?
I graduated from North. I graduated from Westchester in 2001. So
Okay.
what are we at? 11 years, 12 years, something like that. Um, long enough that I've stopped counting on all that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, since 2001. And I've taught everything professionally from kindergarten up to 12th grade. And, I approach every class that I teach the same exact way. How can I inspire today? And
Ah.
you take the kids that are in front of you and you do whatever you can to keep them interested and keep them learning, and know that sometimes, you strike out and sometimes you swing for the fences and sometimes you do really good. And
Mhm.
it's just like with the babies here, you know,
Yeah.
not every time you change the diaper are they going to pee on you. Have a good time with it.
I have to tell you, when we chatted briefly the other day, when you talked about Robert
Mhm.
crawling,
Mhm.
and oh goodness, I've forgotten your little girl's name,
Sarah.
Sarah rolling,
Mhm.
and I thought absolutely fantastic, because so many parents don't allow for that floor time anymore, the
Yeah.
tummy time, and it is so important, the cross lateral movement,
Yeah.
and people don't realize, well, that Mother Nature gave us everything that we need, and we can't ignore her. We can't thumb our noses at her. Children are spending. I heard a pediatrician say that children are spending upward of 60. That's 60 waking hours a week in things. What a colleague of mine calls containerized. Uh, you know, high chairs and bouncy seats and walkers and all these containers, and it's having a very detrimental effect on them, and it's not just physical, it's mental as well. So
It
um
it really is all about how you think about it. One of the things that I got out of my first teaching experience, my principal had this saying that says, if you wake up every morning and you tell your spouse, I'm going to work, you're doing it wrong. If you wake up and you tell your spouse, I'm going to school, that's a completely different mindset that you have. And I
I
have this
like it.
speech that I give to my kids. I said, when you come in and you grab your violins and we sit, I don't say we're going to work today. We're going to play. We're going to
Hmm.
experience. We're going to experiment. Yes, we all know that it's hard work, and it's a discipline, and it's all those things that musicians are. But
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, when you put that violin under your shoulder, you're going to play. And that's a
Hmm.
completely different vibe than sitting in math class or sitting in, advanced brain surgery AP classes and stuff like that. And it's just I just tell myself, you got to flip that switch. We're not here to X, we're here to do this, and we're here to play. And
Yeah.
and it's the same exact thing I take with the kids. You need to have that time for them to roll around and experience and bump their heads into things and have a good time with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can't bubble wrap them,
Absolutely.
although Lord knows parents are trying these days.
So at some point, you and I had the same conversation with ourselves, which was, I think I'd like to get into podcasting. Tell me a little
Oh,
bit
no,
about that
no,
moment.
I didn't have that conversation
Really?
at all.
Okay.
I mean, what happened was that Errol St. Clair Smith
Mm-hmm.
has a company called Jack Street Media, and at the time he was producing, multiple radio programs, and he was looking for experts that he could build programs around. And the childhood obesity crisis was raging, and probably that's what he Googled to find me. And they approached me and asked if I would be interested in uh, co-creating and hosting a radio program online. Now, at the time, Jeff, I had never, that was 7.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I had not heard the term podcast.
Oh.
I know. I know. I mean, I had just never heard the word. So I had to do a lot of research before I decided that I would go ahead with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very intrigued. The opportunity to bring the message to many more people than I can reach just with my speaking engagements and my books. So I said yes, and we decided to do a 12-week pilot, and we just blew right past that. Just kept on going. There was never any thought of stopping. So the first show was it was called Body, Mind, and Child, because the first conversation that Errol and I had, he asked me about my work, and I started babbling on, and he told me that he thought um, the body-mind connection was something that I felt very strongly about, and he picked up on that. And so we focused on early childhood with body, mind, and child, and originally it was for parents, but we got so much interest from early childhood educators that we started going in that direction. And so that was the start of my podcasting career. I never really expected to be a radio host.
And what happened after that to grow into what we know as the BAM radio network?
I think the first thing that happened was I interviewed Mark Ginsburg, who at the time was executive director of National Association for the Education of Young Children. And Errol approached him and asked him if he would be interested in co-hosting a second show with me. And my memory is like the worst, but the way I recall it, NAEYC was the first, it was certainly the first association radio program. And then we started approaching other of the education associations, and then we added new hosts to the network, and suddenly we were not just a show, we were an online education radio network. So it's the growth has been quite amazing, quite amazing.
And you've got several shows now dealing with a multitude of topics. What are some of the topics of shows that you have these days?
Oh, there's a lot around ed tech, ed tech chat, and uh, I don't even know all of the shows, but we have the one for parents is hosted by Dr. Regina Lamourelle, and that's called Inside the Minds of Teens and Tweens, which is someplace that I personally avoid whenever possible. Holly Elisa Bruno hosts heart-to-heart conversations on leadership, and she does a wonderful job with that. And then Vicki Davis does Every Classroom Matters. We do Ed Chat, which is a weekly roundup of the Twitter Ed Chats. So there's a lot going on there, and in addition to like National Association for the for elementary school principals, they have their own, and secondary school principals, and National Association of School Nurses. That's a very popular one. The school nurses really have gravitated toward online radio, so that's very cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I was flashing up the website, but I don't think we quite gave the website's address out there. Where can we find more information, and what is your website there?
It's BAMRadionetwork.com. And the BAM began as an acronym for body and mind. So
I did not know that.
yeah, it's just a little nod to our first show. So
See, I thought it was an Emeril Lagasse term.
I do see it all over the place, and I hear it all the time. And yes, Emeril says it quite frequently. But yes, that was Errol's idea.
Nice. I did not know that. I like that. Definitely check them out. They've got some great hosts over there, some great shows over there. And, of course, you can check them out on Twitter at BAM Radio Network on Twitter. And you also follow the Twitter handle of Body, Mind, Child, right? So they can certainly get a hold of you there as well.
Yes, I would love to have educators follow me, and I'll follow them back, and we will share. And social media, it's a brand new world from when I first started, Jeff.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that social media. I mean, there's been a lot of trends, and certainly in education, there's a pendulum that swings back and forth, depending on who's sitting on the top chair and where these other pieces fall on the chessboard.
Yeah.
Would you say social media is one of, if not the biggest game changer in the last 10 or 15 years for educators?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For one thing, it gives them a voice that they didn't have before. It gives them the strength of numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when the teachers in Seattle boycotted the MAP test? Well, if that had happened many years ago, they wouldn't have won that fight because they would have just been a lone group. But social media got hold of it, and they had the support of their personal learning networks, and people like Diane Ravitch are able to tweet these things and blog about these things, and
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, I think it's been a huge game changer. um, I don't think that early childhood people, educators, have really gravitated to Twitter in the way that the rest of the education world has, and I wish that they would find that way to connect, because they're so isolated, so much of the time. But yeah, it's amazing.
It,
Finding the time to do it is
well, and you're right about that. It does seem like, the K to 12 educator is certainly gravitating towards being connected.
yes.
And, it's interesting that you have the middle of the sandwich where the early educators haven't quite found it yet. And I haven't quite seen, and I know there's a few hashtags here or there, but I haven't really seen the higher ed people. And, there's higher ed chat and things like that, but I don't see a lot of the universities and college professors trying to connect with each other
Yeah, I
yet.
think you're right about that. So it is the middle of the sandwich.
It is
Interesting.
interesting. It's the reverse Oreo effect. I'm not sure if that's the right way of
I
looking
don't
at it.
know. Oh, now I want an Oreo.
And it's also neat to see through social media, we talk about student voice, we talk about getting students involved in sharing their thoughts and feelings. And, we are, as educators, are not working for school districts. We're, as educators, are working for the students.
Yes.
So it's really nice when teachers are listening to that voice and using that to basically, sculpt curriculum, sculpt minds, sculpt how school districts are going to be running into the future. It's really, really important that we listen to all that.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've spent a lot of time here talking a lot about where you are, where you've been. Where do you see yourself going here? Where do you see BAM Radio going? Where do you see your podcast going? Where do you see? We haven't even talked about the Bammy Awards yet, which I certainly would like to have you talk about. But where do you see all this going in the next 2 to 5 years?
I have no idea.
Isn't
I
that a
should
great
mention
answer?
that I should mention that Body, Mind, and Child was my show, and now I'm doing one called Teacher's Aid,
Mhm.
AID, and it's solutions for the challenges teachers face. So there's no shortage of ideas there,
Mhm.
topic ideas, because they face lots and lots of challenges. But I hope that we just keep increasing our reach. Errol is the idea person, and they just keep spinning in his mind, and when he's got a plan he wants to implement, that's when I hear about it. So um, I think that it really just comes down to increasing reach. I read an article recently that said podcasting is becoming more accepted and more popular. I think you and Errol and those who got into it early on were definitely ahead of your time. Um, but now, of course, you can listen to podcasts in the car and take it with you, and so I think that has made a real difference in
I often call it an education in your pocket, because
yes.
anytime that you want something, it's here. I mean,
Yes.
iTunes. This might have been the same article, but iTunes just announced they've hit 1 billionth podcast subscriber.
Really, 1 billionth.
1 billionth podcast subscriber, and you know there's a lot of shows on BAM. If you like something that's in there, you can subscribe to any of those. You can get a
Yeah.
show. You can subscribe to the whole network. Same thing on TeacherCast, where you can subscribe to any of our different shows that we put out. And it really does become that, what do you want to learn today?
Mm.
It is like, what was it? If you research Steve Jobs, he dropped out of college, but he still stayed. And instead of taking a course, he kind of popped into this course and popped into this class. And that really is my concept of podcasting. If you want to listen to
Uh,
this show that Vicky did, great. Listen to that episode. If you like this show that Jeff did, great. If you like this show that Ray did, great. You don't have to invest all, we don't have to do the whole back channel. You can just pick out
Right.
this topic or this topic or this topic, and if it takes 10 minutes, great. If it takes an hour, it takes an hour. But
Mm.
everybody here drives to work. So everybody
Mm.
has time to listen to a show or listen
Yeah.
to half a show or put a show on at work. And I think that's just an invaluable piece, especially when we're talking about things like unconferences and the
Mm.
idea where if you don't like where you are, it's the rule of 2 feet. You get up and leave. And I take that very seriously with the podcast. If you don't like me, you can turn me off and go to the next person. And
Yeah.
I love that about podcasting because it really is education that you want to do when
Mm-hmm.
you want to do it, right?
Yep. Yep. I think that it's helping to change the face of professional development for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love it when I get a lot of teachers that call me up and administrators that say, I want to do a show for my district. How do I
Mm-hmm.
do that? How do we set up these video shows so that way, I hate to say it, but instead of bringing on people to come in for thousands of dollars, we have our own staff coming in and making all these videos. So you're turnkeying your own information with your own staff.
Mm.
I think that's pretty cool that you're starting to use all this technology to do it. I mean, I love doing it with my kids too. It's neat to
Yeah.
see your kids reach out and do all those different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like before we go
Mhm.
just to mention the Bammy Awards.
Sure, please do. Was that one of
Uh,
Errol's ideas, or how did all that start?
Yes, that was Errol's idea. And just in all the conversations, that we've had with educators, a couple of things became clear. I mean, they were, I mean, that the narrative in education these days is so negative, and
Mm-hmm.
and they're struggling for respect and all of that. Um, so Errol thought, we should have an awards program. But the other thing that was clear to him was that everyone was operating in silos, as they say. Um, and the principals had their own set of awards, and the teachers had theirs, and the school nurses and the school librarians. So he came up with the idea of making it a cross-discipline awards program, and it's the only one that I know of. It's really quite wonderful. So of course it was, we called it the Bammy Awards, and within 9 months of his coming up with this idea, we were hosting the first ceremony here in DC, and he also thought, why shouldn't we treat them in the way that celebrities are treated? So it's the whole red carpet deal, and it's just a magical night. They arrive in limousines, and they've got their gowns and their tuxes on, and they're interviewed on the red carpet, uh, and the Bammy Trophy is just a glorious 9 pound, beautiful sculpture, and it's just it's a very, very nice way of honoring all of those in the education village and bringing them together.
I love the tradition. I remember going out the first year that the Bammys were and just meeting everybody and seeing everybody. I mean, the show is amazing, first of all. And what
Mhm.
really sparked me, and you got to tell me whose idea this was, but when we got there into the theater, you had an orchestra of students.
Oh.
And I absolutely like I sat down, I looked, and I immediately got on text messages with my wife and took some pictures. I'm like, this is fantastic that they're doing a youth orchestra on stage.
Of course, that would appeal to you. Well, we wanted live music, and a youth orchestra seemed to make the most sense because we were honoring educators. So I told the story this third ceremony that we just had in September. We gave the Washington Metropolitan Youth Orchestra a special Bammy Award. And before presenting it, I told the audience the story. I had another orchestra on board for that first ceremony. And just a matter of weeks before, they backed out. So I got online again and started researching, and I found the Washington Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, and amazingly, their director and um, and their conductor decided that it was worth the experience, for the kids to have that experience. So they pulled it together in such a short amount of time, and they've been with us all 3 years now. It's I can't imagine the Bammy Awards without them. It is special. And this year they did their performance in the middle of the ceremony, and they got the only standing ovation of the night. So it's people definitely respond to it.
I think it's a fantastic thing, and I'm thinking about it right now, but the best part of the entire night that year was afterwards. Everyone's in their gowns and they're taking pictures and stuff. I walked over to the kids because the kids formed these little quartets, and I just had a chance to sit down and talk with these kids as musician to musician, and trying to, because you're trying to look, hey, I'm also a gigging musician, and I've got this, and I'm an orchestra director, and how you doing with things, and having a chance to talk to the director there. Forget the glam and the glitter. For me, that was the coolest part. Was actually getting down and just meeting those kids and seeing the passion that goes on that, and seeing the relationship they have with each other. That's to me what education's about. I seeing those kids really shine in a, not even a national, but a global spotlight. That was really cool.
Yeah, and Henry Segrisi is the conductor, and he told me last year they had several, I guess, seniors graduate, and they cited the Bammy Awards as one of the highlights of their orchestral careers, and that was just so gratifying. And it's really, wonderful. I'm glad you had a chance to talk to the musicians that year.
Yeah, it was. Cool. I was torn between getting pictures of, this is awesome, this is awesome, this is awesome, I'm in my tux, I'm doing a good thing, oh my goodness, and hey, there's a viola player over there. Hey, I want to go talk to that kid. No, and this is really, really neat. And then I always remember that stuff, and because that was me, right? Like that was a couple years ago, that was me doing all that stuff, and it was, like I said, that's really neat. Where can people go to find out more information about the Bammy Awards, or maybe see some pictures or videos?
Oh yeah, there's both pictures and videos at BammyAwards.org.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Check them out and see what kind of fun we had. And of course, let me think now. The Bammy Awards are in September. Sometime in I should know this, but sometime in late spring, I believe, we open up the nominations, and anyone can nominate. A school nurse, attendant, a school board member. We welcome those nominations. We're looking to honor the doers in education, the people who are making a difference. So
definitely check that out. BamRadioNetwork.com, or what was that? BammyAwards.com?
Awards, yep. BammyAwards.com or .org will get you there.
Rae, I want to say thank you so much for spending some time with us today and telling us a little bit about yourself, the woman behind the microphone, as we say, and certainly talking to us a little bit about BAM Radio, and yeah, congratulations on all the success, and please come back on the show at some point. We'd love to have you on.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate the invitation. This has been great fun. It wasn't so bad being interviewed.
Well, stick around. We have more for you from our audience, and thank you so much again for coming on.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, my friends, that wraps up the 112th episode of the TeacherCast podcast. I want to thank again Rae from BAM Radio Network for coming on the show today and spending some time with us. Don't forget the Tech Educator podcast broadcasts live every week on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock on TeacherCast.tv. We can, of course, be heard on various podcasting platforms such as iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, MediaCore, and wherever else you find educational podcasts. There's, of course, many ways that you can connect with us here at TeacherCast. We like it when you follow us on Twitter at TeacherCast. Leave us a voicemail at teachercast.net/voicemail. Email us at feedback@teachercast.net. And, of course, subscribe to our many audio and video channels over at teachercast.net/iTunes and teachercast.net/YouTube. Thank you again for allowing TeacherCast to be a part of your professional development network, and I hope you take a moment to share TeacherCast with your PLN. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for making TeacherCast your home for your professional development. Until next time, keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students. We want to take a moment here and say thank you to everybody out there who's watching or listening to the TeacherCast Educational Broadcasting Network. There's, of course, several great ways that you can participate in TeacherCast each and every week. We love it when you find us on Twitter at TeacherCast. Like us on Facebook over at teachercast.net/Facebook. Subscribe to our many audio channels and video channels over on iTunes. Email us at feedback@teachercast.net. Find us on Pinterest. And, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel at teachercast.net/YouTube. The TeacherCast Educational Broadcasting Network. What do you want to learn today?